Good evening and welcome to tonight's District 4 City Council Candidate Forum brought to you by the Hampton Heights Civic Association. My name is Mark Orrs and I am president of the HHCA and I will serve as moderator for tonight's forum. This election cycle, there are two candidates running to represent District 4 on Denver City Council. They are Tony Pigford and Diana Romero Campbell. I will now post each candidate's official campaign website in the chat feature so you can visit and learn more about each candidate and their platforms, and I will post this again throughout the discussion. Tonight, each candidate will be allocated a total of 30 minutes of time with us. By coin toss, Tony Pigford will go first. Diana Romero Campbell will be asked to join after Tony's 30 minutes are up. I'll start by asking each candidate to introduce themselves in 5 minutes or less, and then we'll move on to 15 minutes devoted to the questions that have been submitted and rank voted by members of the HHCA. The final 10 minutes will be reserved for follow-up and additional Q&A with each candidate, and I'll post some additional instructions and links in the chat feature as we go to help facilitate this final interaction. Finally, please note that this evening's event is being recorded and a recording of tonight's forum will be made available to the public. Tony, your 30 minutes begin now. Please open with up to 5 minutes of introduction.
Awesome. Thank you, Mark. And thank you to the Hampton Heights Civic Association for hosting this event. As you all know, it's a critical election and these conversations are important. So thank you for having me this evening. My name is Tony Pigford and I'm running to represent Southeast Denver's District 4. I'm a fourth generation Denverite, a third generation product of Denver Public Schools, and I come from a long line of educators, entrepreneurs, and social justice champions. Both sides of my family came to Denver in the late 1800s, and so we've been working hard to make Denver a place for over 120 years. From Southeast Denver, I attended Southmore Elementary School and Thomas Jefferson High School, where I also went back to coach high school basketball for 4 years. The house that I live in with my wife, Robin, we bought from my in-laws who had been here for 39 years. And I mention that because my wife and I both come from education backgrounds. And with the housing crisis, we wouldn't have been able to afford to live in this home if we weren't able to buy it from my in-laws. I come from a solidly middle-class background. My mother was an educator, a teacher and principal in Denver Public Schools, and she was a pioneer in multicultural, gifted and talented education and also a union member. I learned the power of organized labor as a little boy when my mother had me join her on the picket line when she struck when she was a teacher. My father was a small business owner. At its largest, he employed 18 employees. And I am currently in a union household. My wife is an educator and teacher in Denver Public Schools. She's in her 16th year. And I've been an educator in Denver Public Schools as well. And we have our 15-month-old son, which has been just a joy. A little bit of juggling running for office with a young baby, but it's been fun. A little bit about me professionally. I spent the first half of my career in the for-profit sector. I was involved in some small business startups, which were fun. The work that I found most rewarding was in the software sector, where our job was to process workers' comp claims for federal employees. And the largest group that we were able to help was postal workers. The second half of my career has been in youth leadership development and education. I was the founding dean of students at an all-boys public middle school, and I was a district coordinator with Denver Public Schools, a student voice and leadership coordinator, where our work reached 22 different DPS high schools, including my alma mater, TJ. If any of you are wondering why I'm bald, it's because I was a dean of students in an all-boys public school. That work was extremely rewarding. Throughout my work in education and even in the for-profit sector, I've been very involved in city politics, mainly because I've been disgruntled, for lack of a better word, in the direction that our city has been headed, and really disgruntled in the fact that our city government has really been treating developers and lobbyists as their priority and not the citizens of Denver and definitely not our environment. So I've led 3 successful ballot initiatives. In 2018, it was Democracy for the People. In 2019, it was Let Denver Vote. And in 2021, it was Yes for Parks and Open Space, which is what created the citywide vote about the conservation easement at Park Hill Golf Course. I'll wrap it up. As you all know, it's such an important election. We've got an open mayor's seat, 5 open council seats. We need to elect true bold leaders that will co-govern with their community so that we're all working together to collectively make Denver a more vibrant, safe, affordable, and sustainable city. It's the first time in probably 20 years that we have the opportunity to elect folks that will put the people first and our environment, and really develop a city and create a city that we are extremely proud of. So I'll stop there, open it up for questions. And again, thank you for having me this evening.
Thank you, Tony. We will now be devoting the next 15 minutes to questions that have been submitted and voted upon online by members of the HHCA. Our first question is related to business revitalization, specifically on and around Hampden Avenue. We actually had two different questions that were submitted related to this topic, and I will read both and then ask you to respond to them both at one time. With so many businesses closing down on Hampden between Tamarack and Havana, how would you plan to revitalize the area and attract new businesses? The second question is a little bit longer, but related to the same idea in some more depth. While Southeast Denver has a lot of wonderful qualities, it is still missing some key components that could really propel its viability as a sought-after business district. Area residents have an appetite for more neighborhood restaurants and locally owned businesses that will offer our community more character and diversity. You only have to look at the recent opening of Zane's Italian restaurant last summer to realize the level of consumer demand in our area. Unfortunately, there are a lot of other businesses that I think are stunting our potential and holding us back. Centerfold Strip Club and Oasis Nightclub are a couple of examples of businesses that attract crime and repel business investment. We also have shuttered businesses like the Village Inn that have been closed for years. If elected, what is your plan to help make sure our neighborhoods and business districts reach their full potential so that CD4 residents have opportunities to reinvest their hard-earned paychecks back into their own neighborhoods? And I will copy and paste both these questions in the chat as well, so since they were so long.
Thank you. I appreciate the question. It's a great question. As someone that is from here and lives here, I agree. There's a dearth of locally owned, unique small businesses in Southeast Denver. And I look at what's happened through COVID and the shuttering of a lot of businesses, and it's been devastating and sad, but I also see this time of uncertainty as such a tremendous time of opportunity. Like now is the time that we really have the opportunity to shape what commerce looks like in Southeast Denver. And specifically, you know, the Tamarack all the way up to Havana corridor. And I think there's other places in District 4 that could use some revitalization attention as well. My leadership approach and how I would approach this issue would be to be extremely proactive. You've got to work with commercial real estate brokers, and then you've got to be plugged into the local Denver business community, especially small businesses, women-owned businesses, minority-owned businesses. There's a lot that we see at the South by Southeast Festival where there's tremendous vendors that come there. Some might be interested in a brick and mortar location. And so what I would like to start doing once immediately elected is to follow a model that we've seen work in other places where we have pop-up opportunities for small businesses, where you partner with commercial real estate brokers and you partner with small businesses. Ideally, they get a great deal on rental space for a certain determined amount of time. And you can really show the community, like you mentioned Zane's, and that's a restaurant. And there's been pop-up restaurants, but there's all sorts of different pop-up retail ideas where we can see the demand. And I think that the more opportunities we give small businesses to do that, the better. Related with the businesses that are stunning our not only growth, but have an impact on public safety and just the overall social fabric of our community, Oasis and the Strip Club. I don't even know what the name of that strip club is. But we've got to, as that area develops, and I've met with the folks who are looking to revitalize the space right across from Kennedy Golf Course. They wanted to meet with candidates about that zoning change. But I think that we've got to bring more family-friendly, more small local businesses to the area as quickly as possible and kind of crowd those other businesses out, as well as enforce the laws that we have on the books and ordinances that they're already violating. And I've been going to the District 3 Community Advisory Board meetings, and Oasis Nightclub is definitely something that the police are focused on. But if I had my druthers, those businesses would be gone. And we bring in more locally owned small businesses by being proactive with these commercial retail spaces.
Great, thank you. And before we go on to our next question, I will be posting in a chat a interactive site devoted directly for Tony Pigford. If you have follow-up questions for candidate Pigford, please submit them on there, and please keep an eye on them and vote up those that you would most like him to respond to in our final interactive session in the last 10 minutes of this session. For now, we still have another 12 minutes or so of questions from our community. And our next question is related to homelessness. And I will again post these questions also in the chat so you can see. First, we'd like to ask you 3 yes or no questions. And then we have a question from a member that asks you to expand overall. First, yes or no, do you agree with Denver's urban camping ban? And if not, would you seek to overturn it?
Do I agree with it? If not, would I seek to overturn it? I think we've had the camping ban in place for 10 years, and it's a perfect example of failed policy. Our homelessness crisis has increased, and it's been fiscally irresponsible. But overturning the camping ban without a plan in place is also irresponsible and would have a negative impact on our community. And so I think it's a really nuanced issue. We've got to do better than the camping ban, but removing the camping ban or focusing on just getting rid of the camping ban is hardly the step that we need to take.
Okay, 2 more yes or no questions, and then the last one will allow you to expand further. Yes or no, do you agree with forcibly clearing encampments that are in violation of Denver's urban camping ban?
Do I agree with forcibly clearing encampments that are in violation of Denver's urban camping ban? Generally, I think we need to enforce the laws that are on the books, yes.
And then 3, do you agree with forcibly arresting or committing people who do not agree to go into shelter or housing options provided by the city or who refuse to go to treatment for mental health or drug issues?
No.
All right. Our final question on the topic comes from a member, and it reads, over the course of this election cycle, homelessness has been a hot topic and one of legitimate concern given the scope of the problem. While a lot of the attention on the issue has been centered around Civic Center Park and Capitol Hill, we are seeing the impacts of homelessness in Southeast Denver as well. Evidence of homeless encampments are found regularly now in Hensel Park, including trash, needles, and other drug-related paraphernalia along the trails and creek banks. How do you plan to enforce existing laws related to public camping while also working to tackle the root causes of this epidemic so we can solve it once and for all?
Yeah, speaking of enforcing laws that are on the books, I think we need to look holistically at our criminal justice system in Denver. And I've been endorsed by the Teamsters who represent the Denver sheriffs who run the Denver jail. And they're as high as 40% understaffed at the Denver jail. And so as people are brought down there and booked there, it's unsafe for the folks being brought down there, and the sheriffs have unsafe conditions, to the extreme of having women give birth in cells by themselves in the Denver jail. And so I think we need to find the balance of enforcing the laws that are on the books and preventative measures, because the entire system is overwhelmed. And that's just the sheriffs and at the Denver jail. We're also, as you all know, understaffed in the Denver Police Department. And I think that bringing those staff levels up and figuring out a way to fill the empty positions, both in the Sheriff's Department and DPD, so that we are, when we are focusing on enforcing the laws that are on the books, we have a system that's working and a system that's safe. And Mark, forgive me, I need to look in the chat here and read the question again.
Yeah, no problem. It's just above the link.
Sure. Civic Center Park, yeah, it's definitely reached Southeast Denver. I mean, that's completely evident. One thing that I think we can do, when you mention trash, needles, and other drug-related paraphernalia, it's very disappointing to see that in other places, Hensel Park and others. There is a city program that the city's already started to partner with an organization, and I'm forgetting the name of it, but they try and get folks who are homeless on the streets jobs. And one of those jobs is to actually clean up the litter and the trash. Bayout Enterprises, that's the name of the organization. I would like to see about scaling that up in Southeast Denver and already use that existing program that we have with Bayout Enterprises to address some of the trash related issues. And then as far as the underlying causes of homelessness, and I think crime too, it's poverty. And one thing that I don't think that we're focused on enough is stemming the tide of those who are becoming homeless. Getting people homeless off the streets and into permanent supportive housing with wraparound services is one thing, but if we're backfilling that with more homeless folks, that's another issue. January was the highest month we've had for evictions because COVID relief ran out. And so it's really, really complex, but we've got to address the root cause of homelessness, crime, and poverty, and we've got to take a housing first approach. And we've got to be sure that the 50% of renters in District 4 that are cost burdened don't end up on our streets or in RVs and so forth.
Great, thank you. We have about 5.5 minutes left for these questions. And our next question is related to a project that you mentioned in a previous response, in which I've linked a slide deck to for our members to check out. The owner of Kennedy Center is updating the zoning at their property, which would allow for 250 to 300 units of multifamily apartments with a small amount of ground floor retail. Do you support or oppose this project? And can you tell us what factors go into making such a decision for you?
Sure, I've been following as best I can all the development that potentially is coming to District 4, and that developer reached out to get my opinion on that project, and I met with them. My only exposure to that project so far was looking at the slide deck that came from the city and then meeting with the developer. So I'm very, very early on in any type of decision as far as what that should look like, primarily because I haven't talked to the neighborhood and the residents around there. I asked the developer if Councilman Black supported the project. He said that she did. I haven't confirmed that. Like, that's just the type of leader that I am. If the developer tells me that she's supporting it, I've got to confirm that with her. And he said that the neighborhood associations, and he couldn't name them, which I thought was interesting, were also in support of the project, referring basically to you all. And so I need to do a lot more due diligence. I would be guided primarily by what the residents around that project think. And I haven't had the opportunity to get that feedback.
Okay, we have about 4 more minutes for these types of questions before we can interact.
I'll add,
yes.
sorry, Mark, I will add that the developer 3 days ago reached out to ask me for a letter of support, and I declined.
Okay, thank you. Our next question from the community was around policing and including funding of the police. We again have a yes or no question and then a question from the members that is more specifically. Yes or no, do you support defunding the police?
No.
And then the follow-up question, could you please speak to your position on policing, specifically with respect to whether you support increasing or decreasing resources for the police and why?
Yeah. We've got vacant positions in DPD and the Sheriff's Department. And so logically, to me, it doesn't make sense to add additional unfilled positions. We've got to start with getting the positions filled that we already have. I think that the conversation about increasing funding would be more relevant once we have a fully staffed force. And again, both in DPD and the Sheriff's Department. They're stressed from what I found, the police, and they're stressed in part because they're being sent to a lot of calls and incidences. And I think we're making a shift that they weren't trained for, they don't have any interest in related to our homelessness crisis, mental health calls, people who are having substance abuse issues. A lot of the police that I've talked to want to get violent criminals off the street. They want to break up these gangs of auto thefts and fight violent crime, domestic violence. And so we've got to be sure that they have the resources to do that. And we're sending adequate resources to address the clinical needs that a lot of folks on our streets have.
Thank you. Our next question is related to revitalizing Hampton Heights Community Park, and specifically a new playground and basketball courts. And I'll post this question here. It's another long one, and I'll kind of skim through it quickly so you have more time to respond. This person voted in favor of 2A, which diverts 0.25% sales tax to a $37 million more or less fund to support Denver parks. We've been pleased with the new playground in Bible Park, the new bike paths in Hampton Heights. We would like to see a lot more, for example, the new playground and a new surface for basketball. If you're elected, what is your plan to make sure your constituents receive their fair share of 2A parks and recreation dollars invested into our neighborhood parks?
Yes, as you all know, the mayor appoints the head of Denver Parks and Recreation. And I mean, we've got some issues as far as government accountability there. We've been collecting since 2019 between $38 and $40 million in 2A funds. And it's been sitting there. It hasn't been deployed. It hasn't been equitably distributed. And so the first thing that I would do is raise this issue up and amplify the inequity, honestly, and push the mayor's administration and Parks and Rec to be efficient with deploying those funds. I mean, we've been paying them that 0.25% sales tax since 2019. And so I look at places across the city, and not only in Southeast Denver where there's inequity, but there's been regional rec centers built in other neighborhoods. And in Southeast Denver, we've had, our rec centers are great and the staff is amazing, but we haven't had that same type of investment in our rec center in Southeast Denver. And if elected, that would be something that I would like to put at the forefront. It might have to be funded through a bond measure. We've got to find the land to do that. But I would be a very staunch advocate with the new mayor and whoever he appoints in the Parks and Rec department to show the inequity that's been happening and immediately push to get these improvements done.
All right, thank you. That concludes our time for this segment. So the remaining 9.5 minutes or so we have for different kinds of interaction. I'm going to share my screen now, which shows a couple of questions, a few questions that have been shared by our community. But I essentially, I turn it over to you, Tony, if you'd like to respond to any or all of these questions. We can also continue with other questions that have been submitted online in advance and followed up. If you want to interact directly and take hand raises, that's fine too, but I'll just let you know that we have about 9 minutes left.
Okay, so I can choose between what I'm reading on the screen or
sure,
call on somebody with a hand raise.
Yeah, whatever you would like, or I can ask more of the prepared questions from earlier.
Okay. The first one, camping ban. While I believe the law should be enforced, do you think the current approach is humane? If not, how would you encourage change? I don't think that the approach that we've had to homelessness and poverty has been humane. Criminalizing homelessness and poverty isn't the approach that I would take. It's not an apples to apples comparison, but I've been looking at what they accomplished in Houston. It's a much bigger city and they used a regional tax to do it. We might run into some problems with Tabor. And that's something I want to bring up too. Taking a regional approach to our homelessness issue is key. So I think that instead of the sweeps where you're just dispersing people into more unsafe places, what they did in Houston was they sent in clinicians and crisis interventionists. And they had places already ahead of time where people would be housed, but everybody's homeless for a different reason. And so I would take definitely a more humane approach, and we need crisis interventionists, not police and folks to throw folks' homeless belongings in the trash. These questions are bouncing around. When did I move back into District 4? 2018. Yeah, we moved in the house that, like I said, my wife's parents had been in this home for 39 years, raised in Southeast Denver, and my parents have been in Southeast, their parents and sister live over by Eastmore Park in the Promontory. Increased militarization of the police and misconduct against minorities. Yeah, that's a big issue. I don't think that most people are aware of how militarized Denver Police Department is. I think we got somewhat of a sample of that during the George Floyd uprisings that I hope we never have to experience again. I think we can have public safety and police accountability. There was what was called the Reimagining Police Task Force, and you can Google that and pull up the Reimagining Police Task Force that was done here in Denver, and it was done by folks from all sides of the issue. And they have kind of 5 core tenets and 121 different recommendations that are directly related to misconduct and so forth. And that's one thing that I think we can do a better job on. We've had a lot of police settlements, tax dollars that have gone to settlements, but I encourage everybody to check out the Reimagining Police Task Force report. I don't see any more questions on the screen, Mark.
Yes, that's correct. You are correct. Someone asked if they could ask in the chat, and I said they could. I will also happy to draw from other questions we've had. Let me first ask the next question. We do have about 6 minutes left. The next question that came from our community poll was, how do you differentiate yourself from your opponent?
Yeah, I think that there's stark contrast, and you all are an astute, engaged group. And since we've implemented campaign finance reform, following dark money is a lot easier. And so who my supporters are financially is one huge different contrast. I don't have people on my campaign finance rolls that are developers or lobbyists or have any relation to any projects in Denver. As of today, my opponent just in dark money, $127,830.42, and that's just dark money. I don't have any. I think that my track record related to my work in trying to make the city better outside of my job is something that is a big differentiator. Beyond the work that I've done in Denver Public Schools and in the philanthropic community, I've been involved in citizen-led legislation, and all 3 of those initiatives won every precinct in District 4. And so I think that that's a huge differentiator. I'm running to represent middle-class folks, teachers, nurses, firefighters, the people that have been marginalized. You can tell from my endorsements, it's really, really heavy with labor unions because I'm fighting to make Denver a more equitable, affordable, sustainable city. I'm not running to represent developers or lobbyists.
All right, we have a question in the chat. What 3 community partners are you most interested in partnering with to address the issues you've discussed tonight?
Goodness. Top 3 community partners. I would be interested in finding specifically, I don't know if it would be specific to Southeast Denver, but something I'm really concerned about is teen suicide. And I'm not sure which community partner would be the best to work with in Southeast Denver. I mean, there's a lot of organizations. There's one called Colorado Youth at Risk, Make a Chess Move is great. But I don't know about their work in Southeast Denver, but that's an area that I would want to definitely focus on. I really look at our schools as community partners, and I think that our schools could be community hubs. And so I think that those would be natural partnerships. I've been attending PTA meetings at various schools, and so that would be potential partnership. And then I think that there's a couple of different organizations that I would look to related to basic human needs and food banks as well. And so I would actually defer that question to the community. I'd like to have that meeting with the community and see, because I bet that there's a lot of organizations that I'm unaware of and would need exposure to before I could say, oh, these are the top 3 for any particular issue.
Okay, we have about 2 minutes left. I can ask another question, or you could provide some closing remarks.
Yeah, I'd just like to provide some closing remarks, and I would just like to share how excited and optimistic I am about the future of our city and about the ability for Southeast Denver to lead the way in what it looks like to address such complex issues with data-driven and research-based approaches. During times of hardship, during times of crisis, and during times of uncertainty, I think it's the greatest time for opportunity. It's an exciting time. And Denver has the ability to elect a mayor and at least 5 city council members who will take data-driven and research-based approaches and who understand that the solutions to most of our problems can be found in the community. There are great schools, great nonprofits, great small businesses, all in Southeast Denver. And I'm the type of leader that will co-govern with the community, take a grassroots level up approach, and really focus in on the assets that we have and realize that at this time of crisis, it's not about thinking outside of any box. It's realizing that there is no box and all options need to be on the table to solve these complex problems. And so please get your ballots in, contact your neighbors, neighbors. We've got to get voter turnout up. It's an exciting time. I thank you for your time this evening. Please visit pigfordfordenver.com, and I sure hope to earn your vote and support.
All right, sincere thanks to candidate Tony Pigford for engaging with us this evening. We will now turn our attention to candidate Diana Romero Campbell. I will start by asking Diana to introduce herself in 5 minutes or less before moving on to 15 minutes of questions submitted and rank voted by either residents of the Hampton Heights East and West RNO or members of the Hampton Heights Swim and Tennis Club. The final 10 minutes will be reserved for follow-up and additional Q&A. Diana, your 30 minutes begin now. Please open with up to 5 minutes of introduction.
Great. Thank you so much for the invitation. I'm really excited to talk with everybody this evening. Again, I'm a Hampton Heights resident, so this for me is home. To tell you a little bit about myself, my name is Diana Romero Campbell, and I'm running for Denver City Council here in Southeast Denver, District 4. And a little bit about me is I grew up across from Bible Park. My parents are public school teachers. I'm the youngest of 3. I was bused to Whiteman. I walked to Hamilton, and I graduated from Thomas Jefferson High School. I raised my family here in Hampton Heights. I met my husband at CU after returning from the Peace Corps, and my kiddos are now in their 20s. And away at college. And so this is a great time. I know they wish they were here, but cheering me on all the way. My mom still lives in the house that I grew up in, and she's in her 80s. And I think that this is really important to note because for me, it's how do we stay in community? How do we make sure that our seniors can age in place with dignity? One of the things that I am very proud of is I've spent the last almost 30 years working in nonprofit organizations, advocating for children, youth, women, and families in organizations like the Colorado Children's Campaign, the Piton Foundation, I'm just thinking Family Star, Early Head Start, Montessori, and Mile High United Way. For the last 6 years, almost 6 years, I have been the president and CEO of a nonprofit organization that provides out-of-school time programs for young people in 4 different school districts. And I think that this type of leadership really has given me the experience. We employ over 100 staff annually and serve hundreds of children and families throughout the metro Denver area. So for me, this is an opportunity to be able to give back to community. During the pandemic, we really brought our team together to really coalesce behind how do we have actionable supports for families, and that is critically important. We have one of the other things I wanted to tell you is I've had so much fun knocking doors in Hampton Heights. We've knocked the 100 or the 900 doors, and just a little tidbit that I always find fun is like, hello, I'm Diana Romero Campbell. And half the people know me because of the picture of our dog on the back. I'm like, oh, I recognize your dog, because we do enjoy the trails here, walking in the park. And that's something I think that is really special about the place that we live. I know that there's going to be a lot of questions about, that you have for me. And so I guess we can get to it. Just again, this is a really important election, and who you elect to represent Southeast Denver and the interests of Southeast Denver first is definitely something that I believe I bring to the table. In addition to that, I will say that I'm proud to have the endorsement of our current councilwoman, Kendra Black, and also other elected officials in Southeast Denver. And for me, that I am very proud of that fact. So I will end it there. And I don't know if that's my 5 minutes. I don't see a timer.
You have some time left over, but we'll
Okay,
devote
good.
the rest to your other
But
questions.
yeah, sure. No, that's
We will
great.
now
Look forward to
devote
the conversation.
We will now devote time to questions submitted and rank ordered by our members. We will get to as many questions as possible in the next 15 minutes. The more succinct the responses, the more questions we will get to.
Awesome.
Our first question is around business revitalization, specifically on and around Hampden Avenue. We actually had 2 questions submitted, and I will read both questions and I will post them in the chat since one of them is pretty long. But both are related to the same topic. The first question, with so many businesses closing down on Hampden between Tamarack and Havana, how would you plan to revitalize the area and attract new businesses? Second, while Southeast Denver has a lot of wonderful qualities, it is still missing some key components that could really propel its viability as a sought-after business district. Area residents have an appetite for more neighborhood restaurants and locally owned businesses that will offer our community more character and diversity. You only have to look at the recent opening of Zane's Italian restaurant last summer to realize the level of consumer demand in our area. Unfortunately, there are a lot of other businesses that I think are stunting our potential and holding us back. Centerfold Strip Club and Oasis Nightclub are a couple of examples of businesses that attract crime and repel business investment. We also have shuttered businesses like the Village Inn that have been closed for years. If elected, what is your plan to help make sure our neighborhoods and business districts reach their full potential so that CD4 residents have opportunities to reinvest their hard-earned paychecks back into their own neighborhoods?
Thank you for the question. I see it every day, and I agree. This sounds like a question I would have submitted. It's one of the things that I'm hearing as I'm talking to residents all throughout Southeast Denver. Really having places to go, restaurants and bars and businesses, critically important. I think there are some things that we can do through City Council and also through the Office of Economic Development to really entice some businesses to come down to Southeast Denver. I don't buy the narrative that, we don't have the density to be able to have more businesses here. I think we do. I agree. Zane's is a prime example of that, and Citron Bistro before that. I do care what goes in there. When I saw Arby's closed, I care what goes in. I want it to be a business that feels like community, a place where we can come together and have that connection. I think as a city council person, it's also a lot of bringing people down and making the case for coming to Southeast Denver. In other parts of our city, they talk about having places for women and minority-owned businesses to have incubator sites. And I think that we could really consider something like that here. In Southeast Denver, we also have that other over by the Oasis and further. I'm forgetting the name of the other one. It's where the old Bobby McGee's used to be, but that's that strip mall as well. There's a lot of shuttered business storefronts, and I think that we need to be thoughtful about what comes in, and we need to be creative. So thinking about the space and the kind of environment that we currently have, it breaks my heart that the Village Inn has been closed for so many years. Not quite sure all the details as to the why, but I do like that there's a food truck, and I think that a city council person can really work with the other businesses. Maybe we do a food truck Friday, but think about ways that we can get more activity and more action, I guess I would say, on this side of the district. Definitely. I don't think that we're a place that people won't go out to eat. I know that our restaurants that we do have and that are family owned and small business owned are definitely busy. I don't think that we necessarily need more fast food all down up and down Hampden. I would really want to try to bring in places that are more locally owned.
Great, thank you. Before your next question, I'd just like to direct everyone to the chat feature where we have a link personalized for Diana Romero Campbell if you have questions or follow-up for her for the final 10 minutes. Our second prepared question is related to homelessness and homelessness encampments. I would like to first ask you 3 yes or no questions and then ask you a question from a member where you can expand upon your yes or no question.
Great.
The first yes or no question, do you agree with Denver's urban camping ban? If not, would you seek to overturn it?
Yes, I'm in favor of the urban camping ban.
Yes or no, do you agree with forcibly clearing encampments that are in violation of Denver's urban camping ban?
I think that my answer would be yes, but the forcibly, I think, is the part of how we do it needs to be nuanced in a way that is moving people in a humane way.
Third, yes or no, do you agree with forcibly arresting or committing people who do not agree to go into shelter or housing options provided by the city or refuse to go to treatment for mental health or drug issues?
Ooh, that's hard. No, and this is why I think that we have an opportunity to redirect and provide the resources that are available. And I think in most cases we have that opportunity. It's the wait time in between the contact that they have and the spaces that are available for mental health or substance abuse.
Okay, thank you. Our final question related to this topic comes from a member, and I have pasted it in the chat and I will read it aloud now. Over the course of this election cycle, homelessness has been a hot topic and one of legitimate concern given the scope of the problem. While a lot of the attention on this issue has been centered around Civic Center Park and Cap Hill, we are seeing the impacts of homelessness in Southeast Denver as well. Evidence of homeless encampments are found regularly now in Hensel Park, including trash, needles, and other drug-related paraphernalia along the trails and creek banks. How do you plan to enforce existing laws related to public camping while also working to tackle the root causes of this epidemic so we can solve it once and for all?
That's a great question. One of the things that I think is, and again, just talking to people at the doors and in other, small gatherings, I think that we know that something needs to be done. And right now it doesn't feel like anything is happening. We definitely want to be safe in our parks and on our trails. That just isn't one safety, having drug paraphernalia around, not only for people, but for their pets. That is a danger for anybody who's walking. And I think that we also have an incredible amount of resources and focus going on those who focused on those who are most frequently seen, those who we are talking about in parks and on corners and on the street. And they also receive, I shouldn't say they receive, but a lot of our resources go to addressing the issue. Where we're missing a big portion of our population and our resources are to children and families. When you think of a multi-generational approach that really tackles people who are sleeping in their cars or who are couch surfing, we need to be able to put resources to be able to stabilize that. We know that the impact of a child, of a young person who is experiencing homelessness and their trajectory for education and their health and well-being and all of the other things that support their success can happen at an early stage. So I would want to see more resources and more focus in that for that population of those who are unhoused. We also have those who are just one paycheck away. And so really being able to address homelessness with with job training, with quick rental assistance. Those are things that we need to be able to keep people housed in the first place.
Thank you. We have about 7.5 minutes for remaining prepared questions. For the next question, I'm providing a link to a slide deck related to a multi-family development proposal for Kennedy Center between Girard and Hampton Avenues at Havana. The owner of Kennedy Center is updating the zoning at their property, which would allow for 250 to 300 units of multifamily apartments with a small amount of ground floor retail. Do you support or oppose this project? And can you tell us what factors would go into making such a decision for you?
Right. I think that this is a prime opportunity to engage community. This is where we should be starting the conversation well before any plans are being made. That is an area that I actually went to the meeting in December that they had to provide an overview for the community. Again, an unfortunate time because it was right before in the middle of the holidays. I know that they have, I believe the developer, the person who owns that property, owns 2 of the buildings. The church owns one of them, and they have leases, and the property owner has leases that go until about 2026. So I think this gives us a runway of time to be able to have a community conversation of what do we want to see come into the community, and create a, it's neighbors coming with neighbors. I would definitely want to address the zoning we have, and again, talk with community about what it is that would work best for new neighbors coming in and for those neighbors who are already here. I believe it's zoned for 5 stories right now. They also have concerns and are experiencing what a lot of us also experience. Their cars are being broken into, their businesses are being vandalized, and there is, and they worry about, kind of coming out or making too many reports because of those who are vandalizing the cars, as they're calling on them, being stolen in the parking lot, having somebody come after them for that. And that's just not a safe way to do. So I think that we have an opportunity as a community to come together and co-create, talk about what we would like to have. When earlier you mentioned the economic development opportunities, are they going to create, some green space in there? What does it look like facing up to community? What type of mixed use would be coming there? And also what would be the traffic flow, because it's really fast all the way from Hampden and Havana. So you have to think about, safe ways that people would come in and out, and how do we connect to the park, to Kennedy, and so forth.
Thank you. We have about 5 minutes left for prepared questions. The next question, I will again ask you one yes or no question and then read a question from a member where you can expand. Sure. Yes or no, do you support defunding the police?
No. And I will expand on, do you want me to expand? Yeah.
Question, could you please speak to your position on policing, specifically with respect to whether you support increasing or decreasing resources for the police, and why?
Okay. City Council has funded the police. What we have right now is an understaffing issue. So we're asking our police to do more. There's a strain on the system, as there is a strain on our 911 call center. And we have literally hundreds of staffing positions, police officers, that have not been filled. Our population has been growing. And I think how we recruit and how we train is definitely a key factor for our city. I think that there are opportunities for us to do additional training and transformation. How it currently is nothing ever stays the same, correct? So it's like, how do we grow and evolve to have a police department that, nobody wants to be policed. We want to be protected for sure. And I know when I call 911, I want somebody to show up. So I think that we have an opportunity to transform what our police department looks like, how our police department has their customer service, and then also support some of the efforts that they are doing, like the Denver track system, really starting to address the car thefts and the auto thefts that are happening. And do you know one of the #1 car theft locations in Denver? It's happening right here in this neighborhood. We are a hotspot for having our cars stolen. Okay.
Great, thank you. We have about 2.5 minutes left for prepared questions. I will paste again our next question. It's related to 2A, and I will sort of skim through it so you have more time to respond. This member voted in favor of 2A, which advocates for and allocates money to the Denver parks. We've been pleased with work in the neighborhood, including Bible Park's playground and the new bike paths in Hampton Heights Park. We are hoping to see a lot more of that. In particular, the playground and equipment in Hampton Heights Park is outdated. The basketball court adjacent to the playground also needs to be resurfaced. If you're elected, what is your plan to make sure your constituents receive their fair share of 2A parks and recreation dollars invested into our neighborhood parks? And you have 2 minutes for this portion of the event.
Great. Yeah, great question. I wonder about that too. I would want to make sure that we definitely have Southeast Denver on the list. I think everybody thinks, gosh, you guys are great and this is wonderful, but we need to be able to upkeep what we do have. I love the trail that went through, but there are issues with the incline. And we saw it with all of the snow and the ice and how it's drained. I'm disappointed with how that part went in just east of the playground. Do you know where I'm talking about? Like that incline. I think it's a really steep one, and I think they could have done a better job. And so it's not only about having those projects come in, but I do think it's about, the planning that goes into it and the oversight to make sure that when it gets in, it's really something that benefits us all. I think on the other side, there are still trails. So from Yosemite all the way up to like Holm and Hamilton, that bike path has been widened, and I think it's great, but there still are little outlets that still need to be done. And so I would want to make sure that we complete our projects. I've also been talking to the Highline Conservancy as far as completing the work that needs to happen on this section in Southeast Denver for the Highline Canal, which would include a widening of the trail, putting down gravel, as well as widening the path.
All right, thank you. That brings us to the end of this segment. The remaining 10 minutes are reserved for more Q&A and more interactive opportunities, and I defer to you on how you choose to do that. I will share my screen where we have been receiving questions during your presentation. And you'll see a couple of questions there. You may choose to respond to those. You may choose to respond to questions in the chat, or you may invite folks to raise their hands. And we can also go to additional questions from the prepared questions that are Q&A. And I'll note that we were able to get to one additional questions in the previous candidates interview, so we could also share that question with you. These are the two that have come up so far during our meeting, and I kind of defer to you now for how you'd like to proceed.
Okay. I did see one that was talking about who are the 3 community partners that I'm most interested in partnering with.
Great.
Is that
yes,
that one as well?
That was also asked of our previous candidate. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, I think so. I have a few. One of the things that I really want to be able to see, and where, again, I think it's so important right now to have had the endorsement of Meg Froelich and Jeff Bridges, Senator Rodriguez as well, here in Southeast Denver specifically, is because we need to have coordination. Not all issues are solved and addressed at the city council level. Some of them are state level. And so as much as we can have that communication and relationship, it's critically important to be able to think broadly and widely about how we are addressing that. So that would be one. The second one is Jewish Family Services is over in the Tamarack, off of Tamarack. Jewish Family Services right there by Benihana. They have a food kitchen, and that food kitchen is widely used and resourced and a resource for a lot of seniors in our community. I would hope that we would be able to partner with and really lean into some of the other resources that they provide. They do utility assistance as well as mortgage and rental assistance, and knocking doors. I've been hearing a lot about people feeling nickeled and dimed by our fees and taxes. And so finding ways to be able to partner in that way. And then also just with our other city partnerships that we have, one in particular with the Office of Children's Affairs, thinking about how we expand and have more accessibility to childcare here in Southeast Denver. We are somewhat of a childcare desert, and we do have a lot of families with young children that don't have places to take their kids. Okay.
Thank you. We have about 7.5 minutes remaining, and I've pasted the question from our prepared questions, which is from how do you differentiate yourself from your opponent? And then we have 2 other questions that were raised while you were speaking earlier, and you could respond to any of those.
Yeah. How would you commercial revitalization by protecting established local businesses? Agree. I think that there are, okay, so for the first one, balance commercial revitalization with protecting established local businesses. I think it's part of making sure that we have access to our local businesses. I know that I've also heard along Hampden with the median that's been put in, it has reduced speeds, and it also has made it more difficult for people who are going either north or south on Hampden to be able to cross into businesses. And so do we have the right system in place? And I would love to be able to revisit that as a state highway. And I think that it's, when you think about, for lack of a better term, Food Truck Friday, if you have an opportunity to bring in more small businesses and cultivate, I think that we can really start to partner and look at how we're using those spaces, because we do have a lot of vacant space. Policing, absolutely. I think that we do need reforms within our police department. They know they need reforms in the police department. I think that comes with additional training. I think it comes with our recruitment. I think it comes with, talking and working and having very measurable goals as to what that looks like. We build that with community and be able to respond, not just by what my thoughts are, but how we collectively come together to do that. I do not want to see, and I agree. I mean, I think that there has been, especially across the country, what we've seen as over the last number of years, the militarization of police. However, I don't think the solution is by tossing it all out and saying that we don't have any protections. I want to be a city where we have partnerships, where we are thinking about our kids and how we are thinking about protecting seniors. I've talked to a lot of people who are hearing the gunshots, who are hearing the speed racers, who are wanting to feel safe. Everybody's locking their front door. And that's just not okay. So it's a fine balance, but it definitely is a conversation, and one that we need to be able to lean into and have an authentic way. HHCA submit. Okay. Differentiate yourself from your opponent. Well, one of the things is I feel like my top priority is Southeast Denver. I've been raised here. I've raised my family here. This has been the community that I've always lived in. And I live a mile from where I grew up from. And I care what happens in here first. We obviously have to make decisions and work with the city council across the city. But the solutions that we come together with, it is our community that we need to be tapping into. It is our community that we need to be going across to all of our different constituents. And it's not just a partisan, a Democrat, a Republican, or unaffiliated conversation. It's young, it's old, it's how we come together is critically important. And I believe I have the temperament to be able to do that. This is the work that I've done throughout my career, is being able to build things, to bring people together, to do some problem solving, to lean in when it gets really hard. And that's one of my, that's one of my strengths. I'll leave it there.
Great. Thank you. We have 3 minutes left. I can either ask you additional questions from our submitted and prepared questions, or as our previous candidate did, you may use this time to present some closing remarks.
Lovely. I actually will do a few closing remarks if possible. Again, it has been a pleasure to be able to go throughout Hampton Heights and to be able to have the conversations. I'm always open to the conversation. I've been very transparent about where I live. I brag about Hampton Heights all the time. And if you haven't seen my flyer, I've also been putting out on that my phone number, and that's my cell phone. So if you need to reach me, please give me a call. That's the best way when we think about being accessible. I'm going to walk the talk right now. So for me, this would be an honor. It would be an honor to serve my neighbors. It would be an honor to serve as a city council representative, as the councilwoman here in Southeast Denver. And I feel like now is a time where it's critically important that we need balanced leadership, where we need to have the tough discussions, to not have an agenda of what we think needs to happen. I think we create our vision together, and it's that magic that comes along and pulling people together to be able to create what that final product looks like together. And that to me is what makes Southeast Denver so special. The people that we've met, this is our greatest asset. And I want to make it great for generations to come. So I'm asking, hopefully I can earn your support and earn your vote. Please look more at the things that find out more about me at dianafordenver.com. My cell phone number is 720-382-0007. Give me a call, text me, and I would love to have more conversation.
Wonderful. Thank you, Diana, for joining us and engaging with us this evening. And thanks to all of our participants who joined us today for this forum. Please be sure to submit your ballots by April 4th, which is just 2 weeks away. And as a reminder, we'll be sending out a recording of this event to all of our members who were not able to attend tonight. Thank you again, and please feel free to share the recordings near and wide so everybody can be informed as possible with this.
Thank you so much, Mark, and thank you to all of Hampton Heights. Great job.